We are awakening together. This is our weekly gathering we hold online. For more information, visit our website, awakening-together.org. We'd love to see you there.
Thank you. So welcome, everybody. Welcome along to this, my very first Awakening Together homily. So I'm going to do my best, and I'm sure Marisol will keep me going. So yeah, my theme for this homily is lessons in love, and it's really about connecting with all the many different ways that I learned lessons in love from my dad and from his life. He passed away just nearly a year ago, and so I'm really strongly aware as we come around the same season again of all of those lessons really reverberating in me just now, which is, I think, why this came up as the topic I wanted to share about. It connects with something that I learned from Anthony de Mello, an Indian master of the 20th century, who described the whole of our lives as scripture, that we can learn from every single encounter, person, experience. And that was something I saw in my dad, and I want to continue learning from. So that's the kind of theme for today. And I think, having just outlined that and said hello and welcome, I believe it's over to you, Marisol, for us to have our sort of first our Awakening Together song and a chance for people to say hello to one another in the chat. Thank you, Marisol. So I think this is the bit where I remind us of our Awakening Together core purpose and tell you which of the core values I've chosen to highlight today. So our purpose is that we are an assembly of equals, joined in common purpose. Awakening to one true self. Within an appearance of many faiths, many cultures, and many symbols, we seek to discern one truth and to rest in its embrace. And then I've chosen core value 5 to highlight this morning or this afternoon, depending where you are. We accept all forms as temporary appearances permitted through enduring awareness of self. We live this value by honoring all appearances and all experiences while continually reflecting on changeless truth. So I think then it's for me to announce the beginning of announcements. Is that right, Marisol? So can you tee that up for us? Okay, so that's the end of our announcements, unless there's anything else, Marisol, that's come up. No, we're good? Okay, fine. In which case, then we're kind of heading into the content part of our weekly gathering. And we're going to start with my first song choice, which doesn't actually have any voice or words in it. It's a little piece of classical music by Prokofiev called Troika. And it was a piece of music that when I was about 7 years old, my dad and I declared was our favorite piece of music. I think actually I declared that it was our favorite piece of music. You know how opinionated you can be at 7. But so this music, just for me, it's music to accompany a sleigh ride in the winter. And it's just so full of joy that I really wanted to start with this. Marisol, if you could press play, thank you. Thank you, Marisol. The picture I have in my mind now, when I listen to that music, is if you imagine the journey of the soul. Now, I mean, the soul is just a metaphor, but I have this image of all these baby souls gathering in the place that wherever they are before they come into this earth. And they have these amazing sleigh rides where the horses are busy and there's all the bells ringing and they hop on the sleigh that's taking them into this world. And it's a time of incredible excitement and joy. It's like, oh, I get to go to earth. I get to go and have a human life. And the joy is just so powerful. So that's why I wanted to play it, partly because it's so close to my heart and my dad, but also because it just, for me, captures something of the existential joy. You know, we talk about existential angst. Well, for me, there's existential joy there as whatever it is, the mystery comes into form and goes, oh boy, this is so exciting. What a ride this is going to be. Yeah. So this is the bit where I do an invocation or a prayer, isn't it? Just before I talk anymore. So what I hope for all of us is that we can all notice and open ever more deeply to the lessons in love that are offered in our own lives, starting here, now, today, and to be really curious about the many flavors of love, joy, beauty, open-heartedness, and to just drink them in. So we're going to have our reading next. Now, Melissa has very kindly agreed to read 3 poems for us. I didn't go for any of the usual sort of spiritual teachers and what have you, because there was my dad was a huge fan of poetry, and he used to buy little poetry books as presents for people. So I've got quite a few on my shelf that he gave me. But his favorite poet was George Mackay Brown, who was a poet from the Orkney Islands, right off the north coast of Scotland. So very windy and isolated place, but full of beauty. And there was something about George Mackay Brown that spoke deeply to my dad. And when he was in his last days, last autumn, last fall, often he wasn't really able to read. He wasn't able to concentrate. He was sometimes quite confused. But whenever I went to visit him, I would read him 1 or 2 of George Mackay Brown's poems. And this blissful quiet would descend and this smile on his face. And I knew that we were both in the same place, that kind of, the eternal place that's evoked by these poems. So we're going to hear 3 poems. One is called A New Child, and it's addressed to the poet's new grandchild, Emma. And my dad wrote a little note in the beginning of his book. I'm on page 85, each grandchild on page 16. So page 16 is where this lovely poem, A New Child, is. And then on page, my dad had 17 grandchildren. And then on page 85, the one where he said he is there, is called One Star in the West. And it's a kind of reflection towards the end of a long life. And then finally, the 3rd poem that Melissa's going to read for us is called A Work for Poets. And it's a kind of elegy. And my dad saw the words of this poem actually inscribed on George Mackay Brown's tomb when he visited the Orkneys in 2003. So those are the 3 poems. And I'm just going to tell you a couple of words in case they're not familiar, because they might help. So in A New Child, he talks about the keel, which is the base of the boat. He talks about the strakes, which are the wooden planking that run from the front to the back of the boat. He mentions Magnus, who was a 12th century ruler of Orkney, known for his piety and gentleness. And he speaks of Tir Nan Og, which in Celtic mythology was the other world, or the realms of the deities and the dead, and I suspect the unborn as well. In One Star in the West, the word burn means stream. And then in the final poem, A Work for Poets, runes are an ancient writing system that was used by people in Northern Europe, often carved into stone memorials. Okay, so there's the vocab list. Melissa, can I hand over to you? Would you read those poems for us? Thank you.
Absolutely. And I have to share, if I can, just before, we just had the transition of my father-in-law, and I shared some beautiful one-on-one time with him with an old record that he and his family recorded when he was just a child, singing songs, and they were like Christmas songs. So this is so timely, Ginny. Thank you. A New Child. Wait a while, small voyager on the shore, with sea pinks and shells. The boat will take a few summers to build, that you must make your voyage in. You will learn the names, that golden light is sun, moon, the silver light that grows and dwindles, and the beautiful splinters that wet the stones, rain. There is a voyage to make, a chart to read, but not yet, not yet. Daisies spill from your fingers. The night daisies are stars. The keel is laid, the strakes will be set in time. A tree is growing that will be a tall mast. All about you, meantime, the music of humanity. The dance of creation scored on the chart of the voyage. The stories, legends, poems will be woven to make your sail. You may hear the beautiful tale of Magnus, who took salt on his lip. Your good angel will be with you on that shore. Soon, the voyage of Emma to Tir Nan Og and beyond. Star of the sea, shine on her voyage. Should I read it one more time? Wait a while, small voyager on the shore, with sea pinks and shells. The boat will take a few summers to build, that you must make your voyage in. You will learn the names, that golden light is sun, moon the silver light that grows and dwindles, and the beautiful small splinters that wet the stones, rain. There is a voyage to make, a chart to read, but not yet, not yet. Daisies spill from your fingers. The night daisies are stars. The keel is laid, the strakes will be set in time. A tree is growing that will be a tall mast. All about you, meantime, the music of humanity. The dance of creation scored on the chart of the voyage. The stories, legends, poems will be woven to make your sail. You may hear the beautiful tale of Magnus, who took salt upon his lip. Your good angel will be with you on that shore. Soon, the voyage of Emma to Tir Nan Og and beyond. Star of the sea, shine on her voyage. The second poem, called One Star in the West. To have got so far alone, almost to the 70th stone, is a wonder. There was thunder. A few miles back, a storm-shaken hill and sea, the bridge broken, the bright fluent burned, a bruised torrent. But all cleared, larks were singing again, the April rain ringing across the sown hills among the daffodils. The road winds uphill, but a wonder will be to sit on the stone at last, one star in the west. And last, one more time. To have got so far, alone almost to the 70th stone, is a wonder. There was thunder a few miles back, a storm shaken, hill and sea, the bridge broken, the bright fluent burn, a bruised torrent. But all cleared, larks were singing again, the April rain ringing across the sown hills among the daffodils. The road winds uphill, but a wonder will be to sit on the stone at last, one star in the west. And the final poem, A Work for Poets. To have carved on the days of our vanity a sun, a ship, a star, a cornstalk. Also a few marks from an ancient, forgotten time. A child may read that not far from the stone, A well might open for the wayfarers. Here is a work for poets. Carve the ruins, then be content with silence. To have carved on the days of our vanity a sun, a ship, a star, a cornstalk. Also a few marks from an ancient forgotten time that a child may read. That not far from the stone a well might open for wayfarers. Here is a work for poets. Carve the runes, then be content with silence. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melissa. What I hear in those poems is this beautiful sense that's so strong in the Celtic spirituality of the traveling soul, you know, that has its little boat that is made from the things of this earth, the tree that grows into the mast, you know, and this sense of there being no hurry, you know, as this little one comes into the world, it's like your boat's going to be grown, but don't worry, let's just teach you the names that, you know, that's the moon, these splinters that wet the stone are rain, you know, this beautiful imagery. And when we're talking in the sort of our non-dual context, sometimes we can speak as if the conditioning of the human is a bad thing. You know, it's like, oh yeah, we've been taught to see everything as separate. But in that first poem, the teaching is so beautiful. It's like, let me teach you the sun. Let me teach you the moon. Let me teach you the daisies. And then the night daisies are stars, you know, and it kind of evokes this sense of extraordinary wonder at all the difference. So here in that first poem, for me, what it conjures is something which was deep in my dad's heart and spirit, which was a sense of the beauty of it all. You know, that coming into this life with all of these incredible different things and colors and experiences was just joyful and beautiful and to be desired. So, and then of course, as it comes into those latter poems, those two of the sort of the older soul, kind of noticing that the storms have been, and that after the storm, the lark, the bird is singing again, and that the rain is washing things clean, and to sit on a stone at last and just see one star in the west. And I don't know if it's the same in the US, but in the UK, the one star in the west that you see in the morning and in the evening, sometimes it's called the morning star, sometimes it's called the evening star. It's Venus. It's the planet of love. That's what you see first thing in the morning and first thing at night before the other stars are visible. It's not actually a star at all, it's Venus. But this lovely image of the old soul just sitting and resting and waiting for the end of that particular cycle, the end of that particular life. And then the final thing on the tomb of these runes, you know, these picture glyphs, these picture words and stories that a child could read. So we kind of come back around to the simplicity of that life. Yeah. So that's something of what I wanted to evoke by reading those poems. And thank you, Melissa, again, for reading them so beautifully. In that core value 5, when we say that we accept all forms as temporary appearances permitted through enduring awareness of the self, for me, that's not enthusiastic enough. It sounds a little bit like we permit it, we allow it, you know. For me, I would love to say we deeply welcome and love all forms as temporary appearances, delighted and inspired and loved in enduring awareness of the self. We live this value by honoring all appearances. And what I saw in my dad's life and what he really taught me was that honoring all appearances means a kind of deep bow before every single thing, before every single person. So this honor is like the deepest honor that we could imagine. It's not just a kind of like, okay, we'll put up with appearances until we can get to the real thing. This sort of all oneness business. That's where we're really heading. What my dad taught me was that when we honor deeply, deeply, deeply all appearances, guess what? There is the one. So while continually reflecting on changeless truth, yeah, because there it is again and again and again, bam, bam, bam. I love also that poem about One Star in the West speaks of the storms. My dad was a flawed human being and he had some really stormy bits in his life. It wasn't all easy going by any means. And of course, that's how it is for all of us. There's storms. I have an enduring image from when we went on a camp. We used to go camping as kids because I'm one of 7. So it's pretty expensive to take 7 kids on holiday anywhere. So we used to do it by going camping. And I remember camping on a cliff top in this farmer's field in the south of Wales, the Gower Peninsula, absolutely stunningly beautiful place. And we were camping. I think we had 2 big tents next to each other. And a storm blew up during the night. So it was 2 or 3 in the morning. And I was there in my little sleeping bag. I could feel my toes were a bit wet. I think the rain was getting in. And it's terrifying. If you've ever been in a tent when it's stormy, it's like you hear the tent sort of lifting as the wind gets under it. And you think, oh, I hope the guy ropes are going to hold. And in comes my dad in his pajamas and his waterproof and his big wellies. He had big feet and his torch. And he comes in and he's got spare guy ropes and he starts attaching them to the inside bits of the tent poles and tethering them to places inside the tent. And then you could hear other guy ropes being pulled out by the storm, and he'd start going round again. As they got pulled out, he'd go round again and he'd bash them in somewhere fresh. And this, I don't know how long that went on for. As a kid, I was about 12 maybe then. It was terrifying and it seemed to go on forever. It was maybe an hour. But my dad just kept going round and round and round and putting those tent pegs back in new places until the worst of the storm was over and we were safe. And for me, that's a really deep lesson in love, a really deep one, lived out, embodied. It's like the storm will hit and you will be afraid that you are going to get carried off the cliff and smashed against the rocks. That kind of terror, that kind of overwhelm. But something in you, something in me knows how to just bash this tent peg back in, just this one. And yeah, there's a load of other ones that are getting pulled out just as I'm bashing this one in. But it's that sense of the commitment of love that just says, I can be with this moment, just this moment. I can take this breath. I can take this breath. And that's been such a deep learning for me, of just trusting, I guess, that if I attend to this moment of the storm, eventually the storm will blow out, eventually. But even if I don't really believe that, which of course in the middle of a storm, I don't generally believe it's going to blow out. It's just overwhelming. That what my dad did on the outside of me was he showed me what it looks like to just put one foot in front of the other, in your wellies and your pajamas. It's all a mess, it's all a disaster, but you're just doing that. So for me, when I struggle with overwhelm, I've had some times when my mental health has been very, very poor. Just bringing to mind that the tenacity of love, okay, just this one. Just this peg. I can ground again in this moment. And so for me, the tent pegs, I guess, are just a moment of mindfulness with my breath, or putting on a piece of music that's going to soothe the nervous system a little. Yeah. And never mind all of that spiritual business of like, oh, I must rise above this, or any other stories that my mind has. No, actually what love does, love is incredibly pragmatic. Love just says, let's just deal with this moment. Okay, sweetheart? If we just deal with this moment and this one, and you think you're going to get to somewhere beyond the storm, and what you realize is that love was showing you, love was there the whole time. So I jotted down some thoughts to help me, and they might come in a bit of a random order, but I have a very clear memory of dancing on my dad's feet. I mentioned those big feet. Well, one of the things that we would do when we were listening to music, like the first song, was that I would stand with my little feet on the top of his. He had big brown shoes for the weekends. They were black shoes in the week when he went to work, big brown lace-up shoes on the weekends, big enough to balance quite well on. And so we would dance together. And I can still remember in my body, age 60, the feeling of dancing on somebody else's feet and holding big hands that are up here. I can feel that memory. And that's something I wanted to evoke now as well, because for me, that was a lived experience of non-separation. You know, we all dance on the feet of others. We all dance on the feet of Nisargadatta Maharaj, of Jesus, of our own dads or mums or aunts or uncles or anyone who's ever taught us love, you know, and remembering it in our bodies, finding a way of actually feeling it in the body. The body is such a deep, deep teaching and practicing tool. And remembering what that feels like, that is the way. So if you've ever embraced anyone, if you've ever been held by anyone, or ever danced on the feet of another one, or maybe had a little one dance on your feet, or maybe you've just played with your dog and had that moment of joyful silliness, you know, that for me is a deep place of practice. Because actually what we do is we descend into the physical. What I've learned is it's not about ascent. I mean, maybe it is for some folk, but for me, what my dad taught me was the descent, if you like, into the physical again and again and again. And the more deeply I've learned to embody each moment and to love all the silliness and the painfulness and the moments of dancing, the more I've realized it's all here. That, you know, the kingdom is among and within us. One night, my dad came home from work. He used to work very late, trying to earn enough to keep 7 children, I think. And occasionally, he used to drink too much gin at the office to get through the stuff that he had to deal with in the evening before he got home at 10. And I remember one evening he got home late, and it had been hailing, so that there were these big puddles full of hailstones. They hadn't melted yet. And he got in his work suit and his briefcase. And I remember coming out to greet him because I was pleased he was home. And he was dancing in a puddle of hailstones, you know, this man of 40 or whatever he was. And yeah, I'm sure part of that was the gin, but it was also just the delight in a puddle of hailstones. And that taught me so much, you know, that actually life is about delight in something like that on an evening after work. He also knew how to say sorry. Now, particularly back in the 60s, for a man of 6'2", you know, professional, intelligent kind of man, to say sorry to his young child and to his female child, when, you know, he would lose his temper sometimes or be unreasonable or the human things. But he would apologize. And I remember even then as a child understanding that was a way that he was bowing to the spirit in me. You know, that sense of kind of honoring. When it says honoring the temporary manifestations, that's a way of honoring it, is to say, I misspoke, or I lost it, or whatever. And I bow to you and I say, I'm sorry that happened. You know, so that humility is a real aspect for me of love. It's like teaching that it's not just that it doesn't cost anything, because in a way, when we say sorry, it does feel like it costs something. But that actually what it does is it frees us. It frees us. And it's a beautiful dance. It's part of the dance of love, actually. He had a thing for beauty. I learned to appreciate art with him, the paintings of the pre-Raphaelites, the ballet. He had a thing for dance, stained glass windows in churches, swimming in the sea, sensory pleasure. And again, I mention these because, you know, in the Bible, it says that every hair on your head is beloved. Well, again, for me, what I've learned to embrace is this world, this hair, this day, that is where the beloved shows up. And so I'm afraid that when I read I was saying this to my little mentoring group last week, when I read in something like A Course in Miracles, this world is not real, I get intellectually why that is a teaching. But for me, my heart just goes, oh boy, I can't see anything but the real. You know, it's like every little thing, every puddle of hailstones, every moment of some beautiful body moving in dance in that ballet or whatever it is. There is love, there is aliveness. And so for me, I always want to dive deeper into it. Dorothy Hunt, who's a wonderful teacher, if you've not come across her, you might like to look her up. I went on a couple of retreats with her. And one of the things that she taught, which I have found so helpful, is whatever is here in your sensory experience, dive into it. So if it's sensations in the body, if it's something that feels lovely, feel into those sensations and dive deeper. If it's pain, emotional upset, overwhelm, nervous system shut down, all the storms, if it's all of that really difficult stuff, dive into it. Feel it. Where can you feel it? So we're kind of going into the mindfulness avenue and then sort of diving even deeper. So yeah, I can feel those sensations now. Dive, dive, dive. And what happens, this is her beautiful teaching, which I kind of recognize as what my dad was always living, is dive in. Now, what will you find? Your true nature. Because there is nothing else that you could find. Through and within and beyond all particular experience, pleasant or unpleasant, is your true nature. There is nothing else. There's nothing else you can fall into. So you will always fall into that. And so for me, the real is completely, deeply alive in this world. And that includes the descent into hell. You know, we all have those times in our lives. And my dad had a midlife wilderness. You know, my mum died in her early 50s of a brain tumor. It took 3 months to see her off, just like that. And my dad, bless him, went completely off the rails, drank too much and made a disastrous second marriage to someone who was quite an unhappy character. And it took him a lot of time to heal. But what he learned from that was even deeper humility, an even deeper capacity of, I'm not going to judge someone else for messing up, because boy, did I mess up. And then he found real peace. I mean, the deepest peace in his later years, because, I mean, as it happened, he married again at 66. I really hold on to that as a wonderful example of new starts. It's never too late for new starts. And he had a 20-year happy marriage to the person he married at 86, 87. And was kind of like that character sitting on the stone, watching the star in the west from that poem. And he had a sense of blessing. He would say to you often, if we rang, he would say, I'm hugging myself, thinking about you meeting up with your brother or you and your kids having a lovely Sunday dinner. I'm hugging myself, thinking about it. He would always bless us, God bless, you know, and again, one can dismiss that as just a sort of old Irish habit, but he spoke it truly, you know, this habit we can have of blessing one another in every moment, in every little connection, in every little phone call. And the faithfulness, he would ring every week, he would send cards and things like that. But his starting point was always, there's no news, No news this end. Just ringing to say hello and to tell you I love you. You know, and sometimes we'd have a 3-minute phone call, particularly in his later years. But no news. And again, for me, there's something deeply true in that. It's like, I can ring you with news, I can ring you with no news, and I can celebrate just this presence, just this being present to one another, and a recognition that there's something deep in that presence. You know, that at the surface level, it can seem just a little thing, but there's something deep in it. Gratitude. That's part of these love lessons that I learned, a sort of sense of thankfulness for all of it. He was always counting his blessings. Not in that sense that you can get of sort of, you know, I remember when I was a kid, there were adults within the church I grew up in where there was a sort of sense of count your blessings, as in ticking you off, sort of don't make a fuss kind of thing. But when you actually count your blessings from a place of fullness, then, you know, I'm looking at the light falling on the leaves of the trees just outside of my window as I speak. What a blessing. You know, I'm looking at your faces on the screen. What blessings you are in my life. You know, I'm looking at the dog asleep on the floor. I'm actually really glad that she's not barking at the seagulls on the roof just now. That's quite a blessing, you know. And when you get in the habit of this, it tunes your heart, and your heart becomes more and more a kind of clear receiver for light, you know, which is what it's designed to be. It's absolutely nothing more. And there's a teacher called Lucy Grace who calls the heart a reduction valve for the infinite. That it kind of somehow takes the infinite and makes it accessible in this human form. But the more we practice with these love lessons, the gratitudes in every single little thing, the more we kind of tune and tune and tune and open and open and open these hearts, so that actually they're not really reducing in the infinite so much anymore. They're just allowing it to pour through. And that's what I saw at the end with my dad, that it was just pouring through. You know, in the last year of his life, he became quite confused. He was very poorly. He'd had a couple of strokes. He had a couple of cancers. He had quite a lot of moments of clarity, but also quite a lot of confusion. And that was painful for him and for us. You know, he was in a care home and he thought he'd been abandoned at boarding school. And sometimes when he didn't like the food that they brought, he would do things like, once he hid it in his glasses case, the carers came in and said, "Where's John's scrambled eggs gone?" That was quick. And they found he'd hidden it in his glasses case. So there was all of that sort of tender and heartbreaking stuff going on, but also this clarity of all the lessons that he'd shown me that he was learning and living through his life kind of came to fruition, because even when the mind was not quite as acute as it was, the tuning that had happened continued to play really clearly. And what he did was he thanked everyone. He thanked all the carers who came in, all these young men on agency contracts coming from different sort of countries around the world to work for very little money. All these lovely salt of the earth kind of people doing all of his personal care. He would just thank them and thank them and thank them. And then there's one last thing I'd really like to just kind of end with, which is his last words. And I have barely begun to plumb the depths of his last teaching to me. I think it'll be with me for all of my life, which is that this is true spiritual seeing. So we were taking it in turns to go and see my dad. He was in a care home about 6 hours drive away from me. So it was difficult for all of us to get there. So we had a sort of rota going. And on the day when he died, I was due to go a couple of days later, so I missed that last bit. But two of my brothers were there, and they were there with him for the whole of the day. And he was mostly unconscious, and he just came round a couple of times and opened his eyes. And when he did, they sort of quickly came in close so that he could see them and see who they were and feel some comfort from their presence. And the last time that happened, so the last thing he said was he kind of opened his eyes. He saw these two faces of these men in their late 50s, his beloved sons. They're not very beautiful anymore, but they are beautiful in spiritual terms. And he looked at them and he said, I know who you are, and you're beautiful. So this is an 88-year-old man speaking to two 50-something-year-old men. I know who you are, and you're beautiful. You know, that's oneness speaking to oneness. I know who you are, and you're beautiful. And when my brothers reported this to me, I heard him speaking those words to me, because he was beyond just one human speaking to another couple of humans. It was oneness speaking to oneness. So he's speaking it now through my mouth. Oneness is speaking through Ginny to all these beautiful manifestations of oneness. I know who you are, and you're beautiful. So I'm going to ask Marisol to play the next song in a moment. This next song is called Maukunto Maula, and it is sung by Abby Sampra, who is a British woman of South Asian descent. It's a holy, mystical song from the Sufi tradition, and it never used to be permitted for women to sing these songs. So it's something for her to be singing it. And there's a dancer who dances the whirling dance. And again, she's a woman, and it was never permitted for women to dance the whirling dervish dance. And we're not going to watch the whole thing because it's quite long, but you could have a look for it. And it's beautiful. On the day that my dad died, I went to a concert in Birmingham, in the middle of the UK, with a very good old friend of mine, to see this group singing all of these beautiful Sufi songs. And I just sat there for 2 hours with tears pouring down my face because I felt like the universe was just singing to me. And when that night, at about midnight, I heard the news that my dad had passed, I just kind of felt like there had been this complete kind of communion going on all day, really. And the fact that the universe had sung to me in this beautiful song really made it possible to be with the sadness of his passing. So Marisol, would you play some of the song, please? Thank you, Marisol. So yeah, I almost tempted to grow my hair long again just in order to be able to do that swirling thing with long hair. Wow. Oh, yeah, they so opened my heart, those songs, and watching that beautiful sacred dance. Yeah, Marisol's got the links for these videos. So we've got a little bit of time before we finish today. And Marisol, thank you also. She's just put a link in for donating to Awakening Together if you feel moved to do that. If anybody would like to share anything that's come up for you from what I've spoken in my homily, anything that's on your heart, please do feel free to unmute and speak. Melissa.
Joy is in my heart, and it's been such a tough 3 weeks for us from the time there was a diagnosis that we learned about, which was 3 weeks ago, of pancreatic cancer, to his passing at 6 p.m. on Friday night. And it felt like a whirling dervish. It felt like Hurricane Milton. And then all these things fell into place, and his grandkids were able to get here from New York. We live in Washington State, and Portland, and our son from the other side, a 4-hour drive. And there were so many blessings, as you noted, to be counted in the most joyous way. And through all the tears and the pains and the shock, I mean, we thought he had like another year. We didn't know there was a diagnosis. But and then your homily today. You asked me to read this while we were meeting with the hospice people in the hospital. And I was in the hospital, and Steve and I were sleeping in the hospital. And I was like, this is probably not the best time. And then the other voice came that said, this is the best time to get exactly what's needed. And it was incredible. Your joy. I mean, normally there's a perception of other things going on in my head because the ego here wants to feel like there's so many difficult things that I'm overcoming. But your reminder to just love and joy and the whirling dervishes, the love, the journey. And I don't know if that came out all right, but in my heart, it just said, thank you for bringing in the joy. It was beyond a miracle for me. And my husband, who came and sat with me for the first time. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Melissa. I'm so glad that I ended up guided to ask you to read. Thank you so much. Yolanda, go for it.
Hello. Okay. Oh, Ginny.
It's a little bit wobbly, so but carry on.
Okay. Oh, sorry about the connection. I just wanted to thank you. This was a miracle to me and a gift to me. Beyond anything you'll ever know. I'm overcome with emotion right now. Very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Yolanda. I think, John, did you just wave?
Did. I'm surprised I'm able to talk. I thoroughly dehydrated for the last 45 minutes. Just tears pouring out. And it's just an acknowledgement of the dance and what needs to come up. Because, yeah, my brother, Dan, who's here somewhere, at least he was, and I grew up in a family also where we camped together. There's 5 of us. And I'm sure it was as much financially directed as it was what is was in our dad's heart too, to show us that beauty of nature. And so I just want to say thank you for helping me to plumb a little bit deeper and just look at what is there to be seen. Very beautiful, Jenny. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So I know that we've got, I can't remember what it's called now, community sharing after this anyway. So there's more space for people to share if they'd like to. If there's no one else who's just sort of burning to speak immediately, I'll get Marisol to play out my final song, because this one too feels really important. I'd like to be able to just squeeze it in. So this song is called If It Be Your Will. And it's a song by Leonard Cohen that he wrote, I think, in his later years. I love the fact that Leonard Cohen was a deeply spiritual man who, from everything I understand and have read, didn't believe in God as such, but he quite often wrote songs where he was kind of speaking to the universe, mystery, whatever it is. So this song, If It Be Your Will, has this beautiful quality of kind of, I don't know, he doesn't know who he's speaking to, but of course he's speaking to his own heart and to the heart of the universe, to oneness. It's sung by Anoni. Now, at the time of the record, so it's somebody covering Leonard Cohen's song. At the time of the recording, he went by Anthony. He was the lead singer of Anthony and the Johnsons. Since this recording, he's transitioned, and she is now known as a female person and is called Anoni. And there's something about that touches me very much as well. Because of the sort of the surprises of life, the fact that oneness sometimes likes to turn and change right in the middle of one life, I find that very beautiful. So yeah, and the words of this are very tender to me. So Marisol, would you like to play us our final song? Thank you. Thank you, Marisol. I love that idea of us all dressed in our rags of light, feeling the rivers fill and the hills rejoice, just that little echo of a psalm there. Well, thank you so much for being with me and letting me spill my heart to you. Yeah, go well. Have a lovely rest of your day, rest of your week. Lots of love to you all. And I'll hand back to Marisol for transitioning us into whatever's next. I'll stick around for a bit for that one as well.
You've been watching our online gathering. It happens weekly on Sundays at 10:15 a.m. Eastern Time. To join us live in the sanctuary, visit our website, awakening-together.org. You'll want to click on Online Sanctuary in the main menu, and then in the drop-down menu, look for How to Enter the Sanctuary. Right there at the top of the page is a clickable link. We'd love to see you in the sanctuary and join with you in fellowship. Thank you again for watching. Also, please know that if you'd like to stay connected via the Awakening Together channel here on YouTube, you can subscribe and hit the bell for more notifications. We hope to see you in the sanctuary.